Welcome to the Chinese Canadian Museum's podcast, The School Room. I'm your host, Melissa Lee, CEO of the museum. Thank you for joining us. Today, we're excited to have one of our own staff members on our show, Charlayne Thornton-Joe. Welcome, Charlayne.
Hi.
So Charlayne is our intrepid visitor experience and facilities coordinator at our Victoria location, which is located in the historic Fantan Alley in Victoria Chinatown. While listeners may know our main location is in the Wing Sang building in Vancouver, Chinatown, we also have a satellite location in Victoria. Victoria is home to the oldest Chinatown in Canada and the second oldest Chinatown in North America, which began to be settled in the mid-1800s. Hi, Charlayne. How are you?
I'm great. Happy to be here.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself to our listeners? Did you grow up here in Victoria?
Absolutely. I was born and raised in Victoria, and actually my parents were born and raised in Victoria during a time when being born here and being Chinese meant that they were not considered Canadian citizens. My grandfathers both came from the southern part of China.
Oh, okay. And around what time was that? Was that the 1900s?
Yeah, it would have been very late 1800s, early 1900s. I actually have a great-grandfather that came for the gold rush. And then after many years in Victoria, he returned to China. So but both grandmothers, one was born in Vancouver, and my other grandmother was born around the Okanagan Rock Creek area.
And I guess looking back at those childhood memories, what are the things that you remember the most about that part of your Chinese heritage, or the things that your grandparents instilled in you through your parents as well?
Well, of course, anything to do with my Chinese culture and heritage, it always surrounds food. And so favorite foods, favorite smells, gatherings for celebrations, anytime there was an opportunity to gather and have food involved is very much part of my memory and still continues in our family today. But definitely the idea of respecting your elders, continuing and respecting your culture and some of the traditions. And I think that's what my parents instilled in me, and which makes it why I just love being part of the Chinese Canadian Museum and the Fantan Alley location, because it allows me to do that. And although my parents aren't around to have seen this open, every day I walk in the door, I feel their presence.
And you run the Victoria location with an army of volunteers. Can you tell us a little bit more about the volunteers that you manage?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so proud of the volunteers that we have, and I work around their schedule because I've sort of handpicked the volunteers because of what they bring to the table and to the museum. I want the visitor experience to be a wow, and many of our volunteers were born in Victoria, or their parents have long histories, or grandparents in Victoria, so they can tell their story, and the guests love it. You know, when someone comes in and sees the gate, I have a volunteer that says, it's my aunt and uncle that opened the Ming's restaurant, and I grew up knowing about this gate. Or if somebody comes in and sees the lions, I have a volunteer that actually does lion dancing and can tell what it's like to be a lion dancer. You know, my volunteers tease me because they say they came because they know me and they couldn't say no to me. And they said they stay because they have gotten just as much out of volunteering as they give. It has brought them more in touch with their own, sometimes Chinese culture. They've learned a lot about their history. 10 of the volunteers were actually taking a Cantonese course now.
Wow.
Because they really recognize that they regret not being able to speak fluent Cantonese. So the Chinese public school has offered us an adult class, and so they've all paid, myself included, to brush up on our Cantonese.
That's amazing. What I understand is that you also hang out outside of the gallery as well, outside of the work hours.
Yeah, I want to give them a sense of not only just that this is a volunteer shift, but a sense of belonging and having fun and learning about even more about Chinese history and culture. So once a year, I have a partnership with one of our hotels that has a small 30-seat theater. So last year we saw the movie Bird on the Wire, which was filmed in Victoria's Chinatown. And this year we watched the Joy Luck Club. And we're trying to decide what to watch next year. Once or twice a year, I've arranged a mahjong lesson, and they love that, being able to do that. And then in Asian Heritage Month, I've organized a Scrub Up Day of Chinatown. And no one has to participate. If they want to, and they love it, they come and they help remove graffiti and clean the streets and take pride in the neighborhood that they're a part of.
That's so wonderful. It really, to me, feels like you're creating your own community in a way similar to your previous job as a city councilor, where you're kind of creating the community as a city councilor. You're doing it in a microcosm in Chinatown. Can you tell us a little bit more about your career as a city councilor for 20 years in Victoria, and why you became a city councilor and what that was like?
Mm-hmm. Well, before I was a city councilor, I was in food and beverage. So a big foodie and managed restaurants and trained staff. And I felt that I needed something more in my life. So I started to volunteer and become part of nonprofits. So I wanted a sense of understanding women's issues, so I became part of the Women's Transition House, which helps women in abusive relationships. I wanted to know more about the immigrant experience, so I became president of the Intercultural Association of Greater Victoria. And then I wanted to know more about my own Chinese background, so I became involved with the Chinatown Lioness. I'm the third-generation Chinese Freemason member, and my interest just kept going with volunteering. And someone said, you seem to really love the community. Have you ever thought of running for municipal politics? And I said, well, I'm not really interested in politics. I just see work that needs to be done, and I like to be able to get it done. And people convinced me that I should run. And I had just turned 40, and my husband bought me a book that basically told all of the women that were successful after the age of 40.
What's that book called?
Yeah, and the whole point of it was that after 40, women sometimes aren't afraid to take chances. Before that, you're afraid of failure. And I realized after I read the book that I'd never done anything risky. I applied for jobs that people sometimes said I was, overqualified for. I stayed in jobs for a long time because I was afraid to try another job and risk not getting it. And so this was the biggest, breaking that fear. And I believed that if it was meant to be, I would be elected. If not, I tried it and did something that was terrified me. So I ran and I was elected. And people said I would be elected the first time. No one does. So I was elected, and I loved the job in that it gave me an opportunity once again to get back to the community. And I had the opportunity to even focus a lot on Chinatown. So many of the murals that you see in Chinatown today, I was involved with having them put in. The little zodiac signs across. I saw that when I was at a conference in the United States and saw it in Washington, D.C. So I came back and said to staff, I want this for Victoria. And so they put that in. So a lot of things that I was able to do, not only in Chinatown, but for the city of Victoria altogether. And through the years, I was mostly liaison to heritage aspects, social issues like homelessness, neighborhoods such as Chinatown, and tourism. So all that comes together to, really fit perfectly to what I'm doing today.
Can you tell us more about the zodiac signs for the listeners that might not know the history?
Every city I go to, I check to see if there's some Chinese history or Chinatown. And so when I went to Washington, D.C., they had, of course, the 12 animals of our Chinese zodiac. on their crosswalk. And I thought, so often, especially around Chinese New Year's, school groups come to Chinatown to learn about the history. And I thought, would it be great to bring them into Victoria? I always have to make sure that people are safe because they wanted to stand in the middle of the road and take a picture next to their zodiac animal. But the staff worked it so that would work out well, and it looks great. And I'm really pleased that the city was able to provide that as for folks to enjoy.
And they're still there.
They're still there. It was my last project before I left council, and it was a great transition to go from council to the museum.
And would you consider that a standout memory from when you were a city councillor?
There's been so many standout memories, and everything from when it came to homelessness. There was a night where it was really cold, windy. It snowed that night. And my husband was a BC Transit driver. He's now retired. And he came home that night and he said it was so hard to do the last run because people were homeless and they were on the bus to keep warm. And he had to tell them that they had to get off. That night I stayed up, and it just bothered me that this was happening. And I sent out an email to everyone I knew and said, what can we do? And a police officer who I knew reached back to me, and it was like 2 a.m. And we brainstormed what a cold weather shelter would look like. And so the next day we met, and I met with the mayor of the time, which was Alan Lowe. And I said to Alan, this is needed. There are people that could be dying on our streets. So we had the location, we worked it out, and that night we opened a shelter. And they said, how are you going to fund it? And I said I would fundraise. It made the front page of the paper, and the province stepped in and said we will fund it. And today that it is called the Extreme Weather Protocol, and it is all across BC now.
Wow.
So that was one of the most important thing that really affected me, and I'm really happy that we have that in place now. Of course, we need larger solutions to the issue of homelessness, mental illness, and addiction, but at least I know that every attempt is made to make sure people get out of the cold on bad weather. So that's one of them. That other one is being able to go to China to represent the city for honoring Victoria Chung, which is the first female doctor. She was born in Victoria. Her mother named her after our city. And I never even knew about her, but because she was a Chinese woman, she couldn't practice in BC. And so the church that she was involved with sent her to China to practice, and she decided to live the rest of her life there. So the hospital that she was at was celebrating their 100th anniversary, and they wanted someone from her home city to come. And I was asked to go, mainly when I was on council, but her closest friends in Victoria happened to be friends of my parents. And I was actually almost born in their car because they drove my mom to the hospital when I was born. So I got to go there and realize that she is a national hero in Jiamen, China. And apparently when she passed away, the streets were lined with mourners to show their respect. And here she is, someone that I never even knew about, who was born in our city.
That's an incredible memory. Yeah. And I think it's just a real example of how one individual can make a difference in politics, where you're mobilizing something that's important to you, and you get a bunch of different like-minded people that can make a difference, that actually shows a difference. And I think also your second example really shows how close-knit the Victoria Chinese Canadian community was. And was that a good example of how everyone in the Chinese Canadian community pretty much knew each other or were connected in some way?
Yeah, we're now that I'm at the museum, it's interesting how I'm finding, the connections. And I'm finding, we sit there and people are coming in and saying, oh, I know your parents, or, I know the person in this picture. I did a presentation last night for the Hallmark Society, and I was commenting how one of my favorite parts of being at the museum is when people come in and recognize something or somebody. or a father will be with their daughter and say, look, that is your great-grandparents who they'd never met, right? And they stand there and take their picture. We get all the volunteers to say, all the time, let us take your picture so that you can have that memory. And often they'll come back and say, we decided to bring great aunt because we found this picture in the museum and we wanted her to see it. And all of a sudden she's telling the story about their lives. And, as our volunteers say, they just love hearing the stories. We had a woman that came in, and she's very tiny. She's 93 years old, and we have Catherine Clement's sea of portraits on our wall. And she looked at the wall, and she looked at me, and she said, that's me. And she started to talk in her Toisan dialect. And then she walked in, and there's a head tax on the wall, and she said, that's my husband. And she started to tell all the volunteers. We had to have a volunteer that could translate because she only spoke Toisan dialect. But she was separated from her husband during the Exclusion Act, and she was telling the story, got a little teary-eyed. All the volunteers did as well. But now when I'm listening to the volunteers, they all tell the story.
And how does it make you feel when you have days like that, where you have these special visitors that come in?
Yeah. We're very lucky that we probably have a special visitor almost every day.
Wow.
We actually feel that we're not only just a museum, we feel like we're the Chinatown concierge. Because I have people come and say, can I leave mail here? Can you make sure it gets, I told them to come pick it up here. I have people come in, or as I say to the volunteers, they say, I don't know all the answers. And I say, you don't have to. But the most top question you'll get asked is, where should I go eat? So we laugh about that. So people will come and say, where should I go eat? Where should I, go get a haircut by an Asian hairstylist? Where can I get acupuncture? Where can I find this Chinese medicine?
And we have to ask you, what are your recommendations?
Well, of course, we don't focus on one restaurant, and we don't assume that it's Chinese is what they, because we have some great restaurants that are not Chinese restaurants in Chinatown. So we'll try to, find out what they're looking for. Do you feel like a bowl of noodles? Do you want to go for dim sum? Do you want the carts coming by you experience? It's younger crowd. Do you want dumplings or ramen noodles or baos, the new modern restaurants? So we try to spread the love around because we have some great local businesses. And of course, we like to tell about Loy Sing being the oldest continuing business in all of North America. We like to talk about Don Me because of the dim sum, and they've been there for almost 100 years. But we try to send people to all the businesses in Chinatown because they all add to the fabric of our neighborhood.
And where's the best place to get a haircut?
Well, okay. Well, for a haircut, people say that they want to look for an Asian stylist. And so there is one on Store Street. Actually, one of our board members goes there, and she told me about it, and so I go there. The haircut is fabulous, but they also put a hot towel under your neck and give you a massage.
That's lovely.
Yeah, so I treat myself after work once a month to have that full loving experience and relaxing experience.
And are people surprised when they come across the Chinese Canadian Museum in Victoria when they see the satellite gallery? Are a lot of people just walking through Chinatown and they don't expect it?
Yeah, we're really fortunate because if you come to Victoria, you come to Chinatown. Our tourism bureau, advertises it. The cruise ships advertise it. So we're very fortunate, as I said, visitors will come. Even locals, when they say we're having a day downtown, they say we always go to Chinatown and wander through. So we're fortunate with that. And of course, if you come to Chinatown, you go through Fantan Alley.
Of course.
And we have so much walk-by traffic that it's incredible. And some of the businesses have said we have actually increased walk-through traffic because people are hearing about the site. and they come to see where it is. And then they get more business as well. Although I'd love a larger space, I think the location really works for us. And maybe in the future, if we can stay there, perhaps more space could be found.
Yeah, that's always true. Well, what we know is that you're integral to the success of the Victoria Chinese Canadian Museum location. And we hope that all of you come and visit us in Victoria and visit Charlayne and all of her incredible volunteers.
I want to say is I've learned that no person ever does anything themselves. It's always a team of passionate individuals. So everyone from all the staff, the folks that support me, whether it's from your offices or, as I said, the fabulous volunteers, the curators, that put the exhibits together. We get so many compliments about our exhibit, the way they're written, the way they're displayed, the stories they tell. Every day, the volunteers go away so proud that they're part of this experience, because what we want to offer is an experience and tell the story of our oldest Chinatown in Canada.
That's so wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us today, Charlayne.
Thank you for inviting me.
This podcast was recorded on the traditional territories of the Songhees and Esquimalt peoples. We invite you all to reflect on the territories that you're on and the host nations. To learn more about the Chinese Canadian Museum and book tickets, visit us at ChineseCanadianMuseum.ca and follow us on Instagram at CCMuseumBC for updates. The Schoolroom is presented by the Chinese Canadian Museum, hosted by Dr. Melissa Karmen Lee, produced by Rosalie Gonawan, and advised by Sarah Ling and Catherine Clement. Production is supported by Noah Taylor and the Walrus Lab. The theme music and original audio was created by Joshua Young, and graphic design is by Studio Pian Pian He and Max Harvey. Stay tuned for next month's episode of The Schoolroom, available wherever you get your podcasts.